All right, well, welcome to the Kitsap Sun Editorial Board. We're meeting with the candidates for the Kitsap County Auditor's race, and it's nice to have you both here. We'll give you each 2 minutes, just introduce yourself, tell us who you are, tell us why you're interested in running, and then we'll go into some questions. Dolores, let you begin.
Well, first of all, thank you for allowing me the opportunity to speak today. My name is Dolores Gilmore. I'm running for the office of Kitsap County Auditor. Most of my working career has been in public service, and it is what I love. You know, I've worked in the elections division for the past 20 years and have really made a lot of great improvements in that. We've implemented a lot of, great things in Kitsap County. We're one of the leaders, across the nation for accessible voting. And with the auditor's office, I would like to sort of expand that into the other 3 divisions of the auditor's office and make some great changes there as well. I have lived in Kitsap County for over 30 years. I have 2 children that graduated from South Kitsap High School. My husband Dave and I have 4 grandchildren. And my top priorities, if elected, will be the security and integrity of elections. That's one area that's just a major responsibility of the auditor's office, and it's very important in how elections are administered. I oppose any effort that would make voting more difficult, and so I've always been a proponent of accessible voting. Also, within any administrative office, there's opportunities to do more efficient processing of transactions and records. At the end of the day, people come in, they want their ballot, they want to know that it's going to be counted on time and accurately, they want to get their car tabs and then get on with their lives. So how efficiently we provide those services to the public is another real major thing that I want to work on.
All right, thanks. Kelly.
Thank you. Well, I'm Kelly Emerson. About 5 years ago, I saw, in my opinion, the dire need for more private sector influence in our government at all levels, and I set out to offer my skills. About 6 months after I was elected Island County Commissioner, my husband was shifted with his work down this way, and we spent basically the next 3 years only seeing each other on the weekends. That wasn't working out real well for us, so late last year I announced on the record that I would not be seeking re-election up north and that I would be moving and reestablishing a full-time marriage with my husband. It was a hard announcement for me to make, of course it's my desire, but it was a hard announcement for me to make, and once the meeting had adjourned and some of the folks started coming forward to me and thanking me for my service, it got very emotional. And I recognized the strong desire that I have to serve the public. That was something I really hadn't recognized up until that point, the desire that great in me. So when the idea of running after the soon-to-be open auditor's position here in Kitsap County was brought to me, I was quite intrigued and started tossing that around with my husband and decided to take that on. I feel I'm the most qualified for the position because as a former county commissioner, I realized that about 85% of the time or more that the commissioners and the auditors are discussing county business, it pertains to the financial division. I have a college level accounting in my background. I also have the executive experience in my background. I have been managing multi-million-dollar budgets for some 15 years now. Some of those years was with my own personal business. Even more were as a project manager in the construction industry for the electrical contractors that I worked with, and then most recently as a county commissioner. I want, with the office, to be able to produce financials that the basic layman can be able to take the amount of time that they have to devote to researching their government and see for themselves that where their money, how and where their money is being spent, and feel confident that they understand that. And that's a difficult task. Our current auditor, Mr. Walt Washington, has made a lot of progress that way. I want to continue on those efforts of his and really narrow that down to something that I feel confident that people can understand, because I'm not hearing that just yet. So that's why I'm running.
Keep going on that point. Elaborate on what you mean. The the job of the auditor, it's not one of the political budgets as much. I mean, it's make sure the elections work, these sorts of things. So what do you think's missing, and how exactly do you think that matters to the public?
Well, actually, like I said, about 85% of the time that the auditor is speaking about county business with the commissioners, it's pertaining to the financial end. It's talking about the cash flows. And from my background as a county commissioner, I really see that as being more of the office. Certainly, the cash flow is, there's various departments where it's of a concern to be able to keep that going. We get a lot of grant money that comes in from the state and Fed, and there's requirements of reporting and certifications that have to be done in order to keep that going. And that, in some of the department cases, is the cash flow that keeps them up and running. Like, for instance, your health department is the roads department. There has to be certification of funds that were shifted between the sheriffs and the roads in order to keep the cash flow going for projects there and things. So.
Well, maybe what do you see as the problem? It sounded like you were saying.
And being able to have that discernible to the public.
Yeah.
Well, it's just that it's very complex. It's very convoluted. Our governments have gotten so big, and there's a lot of regulations for how that is accounted for. There's a lot of there's a lot of dedicated funding that can only be used on certain things. So it's a difficult process of accounting. In fact, I was mentioning that our current state auditor, Troy Kelly, had sent around to all of the government, the local governments and special purpose districts, everybody, that we don't apply with GAAP, the generally accepted accounting principles, which governments can't because of all the regulations that comes with their accounting. But it was just kind of a disclaimer that he sent that out, letting everybody know we don't comply with that. You don't, because of the process that you have to fall under. So it's very complex, very convoluted, even just talking about it now. And so trying to button that down, narrow that down to something that the basic layman that has 10 minutes or something in their evening that they want to be able to flip through and see where $50,000 went or something. It's very difficult. And I think that's, like I said, Mr. Washington has made a great efforts with that, with his, I forget the terminology for it now, but he has a different report that he does for the people and has that up on the job site, or on the website, excuse me. And it's just quite large, yet I'm still hearing from the public that it's not really something that they can dig their teeth into just yet.
And do you have experience with doing that?
To some degree. I mean,
Similar
with my own business and with the project management, of course, I had to have financials and reports in a manner that were discernible to others.
But you weren't going out to the public with that, so that's why I'm wondering, as far as communicating that information, what do you see your kind of skill or your ideas?
Well, my time as a county commissioner, that was my job, was to be the liaison for the public and being able to navigate them around and feel comfortable that they could understand. If that was one of the questions that came to me, which I often got questions related to how and where our money is being spent. So yes, that's certainly where I have experience at that.
Dolores, one of the things you mentioned in your opening statement was you alluded to some changes in the other divisions. You mentioned the voting, but then what are some of the ideas? Drill down on that a little bit for me.
Okay, well, there's some things that we have started to do already with some lean process improvements. We've been able to take the what was weekly processing and auditing of vouchers and bills that the county pays down to daily processing. That has been a great savings for the other departments. So now, we don't have instances where if we have to return in audit process, if we have to return a voucher for additional information, by the time it comes around on a weekly process, sometimes those would be just barely making the deadline for payment. And so now we have that down to daily processing. There's some more that we can do in transactions in the records division, recording division. Right now, there is an increase in the number of recordings that come in electronically, the e-recording. That's continuing to grow, but oftentimes, once again, before we can record those documents, sometimes we have to reject them if they have missing or incorrect information, and I would like to do more work in that area as well. And of course in licensing for transactions, so people don't have to wait in line to get their car tabs when they come in. There's a lot we can do with cross-training of staff across divisions. And they've just started that. There's I think maybe only 1 or 2 staff that are fully cross-trained, but I think that's the answer for, we were having to make cutbacks in resources. So how do we use those limited resources and still provide the customer service? And that's one way to do it. So, I used to manage the records division as well before I, worked in elections, and I've worked in all divisions of the auditor's office. So I can look across the way and say, gosh, if we did this, if we did more in cross-training, if we got information out to the public in a more concise and user-friendly manner, we would have fewer phone calls. We would be able to provide those services, more options, and be able to better serve the public.
How closely have you been involved with any of those initiatives, the things that have been going on in the office? Because you've been in this department.
Right.
Tell me about some specifics that you've touched.
Some specifics in other departments rather than elections. Is that your question?
If it's
okay.
because you've moved around a little bit. Is that correct?
Correct.
I just maybe some examples so I can kind of see. Here's the things that I feel that I'm good at. What have you touched as far as those?
Well, I can start in elections because that's where I have the most experience and knowledge. In Kitsap County, we were the first county in the state of Washington to provide accessible ballots to military overseas voters and voters with disabilities, and so that was like a major thing. I mean, when the MOVE Act in 2010 said that you will provide military their ballot by email, we knew that we could, at that point, fulfill those requirements by just attaching a PDF to an email and sending it out. And many counties across the United States do just that. But because in Kitsap County we have such a large number of military, we would get calls and information where they couldn't always open the attachment, or if they opened the attachment, there was an issue with printing. So we wanted to look to something different, and at the time there was nothing available. Since then, the state has developed online ballot access, and then there's been several other vendors that now make that available, but Kitsap County was the first in the state, so that was really great. With regard to the daily auditing of financials in the Financial Services Division, they've been trying to get there. In 2010, they tried to make that change, and then they were not successful. So then, of course, we know that it was a continuing problem. So in really looking at it, that's where we actually got everybody together, looked at the whole processes, and at that point, I said to Walt, I could help in that area. And so he said, okay, you're project leader on that one. And so it was really neat. We actually looked at all the processes and the reasons why, first of all, information on why it was not successful prior, and started to put those pieces together. We brought in everybody that did that, not just the financial services staff, but the other departments that bring their vouchers in for payment. And so we started looking at everything, and within 6 weeks we were on daily processing. It was really great, when you get all of the people that are involved in a process and the people that it actually affects, talk to them on what the real issues are. That's when you can start making a change, putting it down, and come to a solution that works for everyone. And so that's what we did. That was, one step. I've done other process improvements in the records division, when I was there prior, and there's a lot more that I would like to see to help that recording process be more smooth.
How do you see your maybe personal traits? Because you're saying what I would like to do is continue working on process improvement and bring technology into it. This is what I'm hearing from you. If you're the auditor, where do you see your role, and how do you convince me that you're the type of personal skills to do that?
Well, first of all, on the auditor role, I know what is needed to make that happen. We need to really work with staff. There needs to be more training. Right now, when you look at like any business or government or whatever, what is the main things we need? We need communication skills, and we need technology, and people that know how to use those two things will help us get to where we need to be. So I know that we've got a lot of great people working in the auditor's office. There may be a little bit of shift and adjustments as far as structure.
I guess that's what I want to know.
Yes.
How do you handle that? Because it's not always easy for people when there's shifts and there's cross-training and stuff like that. How do you personally dive in on a project like that?
Oh, how do I do it personally?
Yeah.
Not.
I'm not telling Kelly a similar
Okay.
question from your past.
I love it. I love to just like look at it. I'm very analytical. What I do is I like to gather information first. Oftentimes you don't have to reinvent the wheel. There is information out there to be able to see. Maybe there's something in other counties or other states, and gather the information and then lay it out and look to see what the real issue is, and then talk to the people that are involved in that. Oftentimes a change, like the leaders will say, "Oh, we'll make this change," and then just let it happen. And it doesn't always work unless we get the people that are actually doing that on board. So it's not just making a change myself, but being able to provide that vision of what this could look like and how it can actually work to the people that are going to be doing it. Once you get the buy-in from staff and the people that it affects, it's great. And then, one success builds on another success. And so I look at everything. I study the laws, the RCWs, the policies, look at history, look at how this is affected in other areas, and I gather data. I'm cautious as far as just making a change without being sure of all of the pieces, and also being sure of the people that are going to do that. They have to be on board, and they have to be able to see it too. And once they see that, it's like, yeah, we can get there, and then it's really great. But I've never been afraid of the change process, but I do my homework.
What's your philosophy? What's your approach, or what's in your background, even what you've done? When you walk into this office, hey, here's the things we need to do. How do you, if you're the auditor, how do you personally start to affect those things?
Well, I noticed some similarities. I think anybody that gravitates towards this office is kind of a math and numbers, an analytical type thinker. I have had experience at going to the legislature with ideas for changes in lots of different areas, of course, from the commissioner aspect, lots of different areas. And so therefore I've had the experience in developing that plan for what you would like to see for change and how to make that argument, how to bring that argument to them. I wouldn't foresee a whole lot of that pertaining to just the auditor's office alone, but I would see the opportunity to help out a lot of the commissioners themselves with a lot of their work in that, and being able to provide them, like for instance, we recently had the public documents request. The Washington State Association of Counties is always talking about how much that costs local governments, and there is a lot of cost to local governments with that, but it's something we desperately need, of course, for that transparency with the public. It was, however, such a concern for the Association of Counties that they took that to the Ruckle House Center. And what came out of that was that the counties need to be able to provide more evidence, documented evidence of how much that's costing them and why it's enough of a significant concern that we take this further in legislative changes and things. And that is where I believe that the auditor's office would certainly be able to provide, the foundation, the background for how much that is costing the local governments, because after all, the office that pays all the bills and establishes that. So I think there would be a lot of close work with the administrative services on those sort of issues, but that would be, certainly that's a strong point for me from all the time I did lobbying as a commissioner.
But do you think there needs to be, I'm going to sidetrack onto that point you just brought up about the public records and the compliance, all those sorts of things. Do you think that is something in need of some reform? Like what the Association of Counties is kind of looking into, are you on board with, and what would you say needs to be looked at?
Well, I think that we have to have that avenue of transparency. So I think that I think there is a possibility that it is such a cost to the taxpayer in the long run. But that transparency, that avenue has to be there. So I think that the Ruckle House Center was correct, and that if the counties can show that it's justifiable, that there are some changes made so that it can be narrowed. I think also that the courts, there was some flexibility given to the courts recently on that, so that there could be maybe another avenue of reining that in.
But you're leaning towards cost savings. Is that what you're saying is important? Kind of drives that from Beach County?
That's what drove the Association of Counties to seek that advice from the Ruckle House Center, was the cost that it is costing the counties.
Did you see that up in the previous county?
I did. We did see that. It is a cost, but like I say, I completely fall on that. We've got to have that transparency side. 100% aligned there, but I think there has to be ongoing research. If counties can prove that it's justifiable, that, and we didn't have anything laid out that way. We couldn't say, well, this is what it's costing us, and we could anticipate a benefit to the public of this from that. We didn't have anything laid out that way. If they can do that, and of course there's a little bit of cost in providing that research, but.
Okay. In your view right now, I know you're in the elections division, so it's a little differently, but do you see public records requests being something that's onerous to our county, more expensive than it should be?
Well, I think that is just the way it is now. I think not so much with the auditor's office itself, but with the administration. The county administration does a lot of public records that come in, and I think part of it has to do with, to me, I'm thinking if we could make some changes as far as like retention schedules. It seems that we keep some things longer than we need to. We never get requests for certain things, and so the Secretary of State has made some changes with the records retention policies. But in the auditor's office, I haven't seen, in Kitsap County at least, the requests for public records being more than we can handle. The largest time that we had like a lot of public requests was right after the governor race, when we had the recounts. We had a lot of public records requests for a lot of things, but I think it's important. I mean, I would rather provide that information than limit it, especially when our records now are mostly like electronic. It's email, it's not just paper requests anymore. We have more records, and so I think in trying to determine what is really useful records to keep and retain and what isn't of any value, and I think it's the Secretary of State that works with the archives to determine that would be the best.
I'm going to go back to Kelly and I'm going to ask the same question I asked a moment ago, or maybe in a different way. Dolores said the word lean during her one of her talks, and we had that in our paper recently with the budget stories, mentioning how those principles are trying to be used in the county. what's your opinion of those processes? What's your maybe professional background? And when you look at an agency and say, we need to start changing these things, how do you approach that decision?
Well, when I was talking with our Commissioner Charlotte, who I used to at the different conferences and things, and there was one of the segments of one of the conferences was Kitsap County on the lean principles, and we're renowned in the state for that, and that's great because it does provide very good efficiency. The background I come from in the private sector, that was kind of just, and especially with the apprenticeship that I went through, that was kind of the skill set you had to show in order to advance to your next level, being able to think about how to most efficiently use that time. So if you were making a trip here to get a particular thing, then from that area of the building, then this and this came with it. So that Kaizen theory, that's how that falls into line with what I was talking with Charlotte when she was explaining to me how that was working in Kitsap. I said, well, that sounds like along the lines of what we had to exemplify in order to advance to the next skill set in the apprenticeship that I came from. So to me, that's the private sector efficiency kind of skill set. And I know that when you're looking at, it comes from the Toyota manufacturing, when you're looking at a redundancy, like for instance, the Ford, that come from Detroit, the big car companies and things, that's certainly where that sort of thing can be mastered. But I think that there's definitely, that's the train of thought that anybody should be taking throughout the course of their day and how to most efficiently use their time.
And Dolores, what have you done to kind of improve your skills? If you're going to be using this in this office, and if you should win, what have you done professionally to understand that process better, to get better at it, to educate yourself?
Well, there is a person in the county that's very well trained and he goes to different departments and divisions and provides training on that. And so you would advance once you take courses. You take a course on what that looks like, the different areas. Depending on the job, you would put in a specific type of lean processing, and there's many of those, so you learn how to do that. And then as you advance up, you learn how to work with other people, usually staff or other people involved in the process, bringing in people that are not directly involved with whatever that is, but outside agencies sometimes. For example, in the licensing division in Kitsap County, they did a lean process improvement with the State Department of Licensing, and then they requested a few county staff to be involved in that as well. So then once you are familiar with how to do it on within yourself or the people that you have control in, it's looking at other agencies, because in government so many things that we do are interrelated. I mean, what you do here is going to have an effect in another department, in another, and so when we see that in budget where you don't want to have these overlaps, and trying to remove areas of overlap is one of the main efficiencies that you could do. So for example, in financial services, when we actually looked at how that was being done, we found that some departments were scanning the voucher, came down, and then we scanned it again because their scanning process didn't quite meet the standard. And so then just sometimes a little change to that could have a major effect, and we could cut out steps. So I think it progresses in levels, understanding first of all what it is, and then how to implement that on a small scale, but also how to implement it even when it goes to outside agencies is very important, and it's an ongoing thing. And I think once people get used to doing that and looking at it, you would implement that whenever you have a new state law that comes down, whenever there is a change in personnel, and when there is a major software, hardware, a technical upgrade, that's the times when you step back and look at your process to see how will that change, whatever that is, how will that work? Will it be another patch on, and we'll patch it on, and then pretty soon the process becomes more complicated, or we look at the whole thing and see where it can fit seamlessly. So, once people get used to thinking that way, instead of just this is the job that I do and this is the way I always do it, look to see, how it fits in on a larger scale. So I think the biggest thing with lean process improvement is looking at it from start to finish, not just the piece that you're working on. And with all government, local government, we all have a piece, but we need to work together to see what's really the best for everyone.
Kelly,
Can I? Well, yeah, it spurred something.
Sure.
That I think we're seeing as a trend in local governments that they're recognizing, and this lean has been brought about, and it's a great thing, and we need to always strive for that utmost efficiency. But what the counties are recognizing, in our state in particular, right now is that we're seeing a trend of the expenses increasing at a faster rate than our revenues, and unfortunately, that to a degree that can't be solved by lean practices alone. So while they need to be instilled, and we need to be looking for those efficiencies and running at top gun like that all the time, and we've seen our current auditor, write that in his annual report on the budget. We're seeing the counties, the association, try to strive for different things to somehow solve that problem. There's like two ways to solve it. One is to increase taxes, and we have right now a cap that the legislature was asked by the governor to put in some time back, Governor Gregoire, and so that's one way. Since I'm not running after a policy-making position, I'm not going to.
Yeah, I was going to ask you, how does what you're saying right now it sounds like what you're saying is a conservative principle towards government is where you're coming from.
I certainly come from that side.
How do you affect that as the auditor? What difference does that make in how you do the job as the auditor?
Well, because the other option for being able to tackle that problem that we're going to see, it's nothing severe. We've at least here in Kitsap, we've reached a little bit of stability. But what we're going to see is, as this goes on, we're going to see those expenses increase. And as the auditor, you can provide areas you could actually work closely with the administrative services once again to establish program values, program and service values, do cost benefit analysis. So the commissioners, because they're going to have to be either raising taxes or looking at trimming as we continue to go, so that if you have, if they're looking in the direction or forced in the direction, whichever it is, to do the trimming, then they can tell the auditor and their administrative services to work closely at what is actually the cost of these program service and values, and establish some logistical values to those so that they can prioritize and where they make those cuts.
Is that something that was done up on Whidbey Island during your time there?
There was significant cuts. Yes, we hadn't really started pursuing that to any degree because this realization of this trend is relatively new, and in fact it's just this year that the Association of Counties has taken a stand to reach out to the governor to repeal that, and so it's a trend that we're just now seeing.
What perspective do you bring to Kitsap County after your experience on Whidbey? What did you learn in that county government that you think is something that makes you prepared for this job?
Well, they run very similar. I mean, I did a lot of work at the state with all the other counties, and so we had a lot of conversation between other commissioners and other positions. I spent a lunch with the administrator we have here, actually a couple of administrators, and one, I forget her name, I was at one of her talks sometime back. And Glenn, is it Glenn, or is that his first or his last name that's in the administrative services right now? He was, so there was a lot of work, and I'm not going to say that there's anything that pertains just to Island County. I think that, there's a lot of them run very similar. We have, here in Kitsap, we have that administrative services department where we didn't. In Island County, we had a budget director, which was a smaller version of that. So, there's, we're under the commissioner form, so there's not a whole lot of difference there. So basically, the local government understanding from that private sector background.
When you made the move down here, I need to ask, when you made the move down here, there was some contention among the commissioners on the board there. Can you explain kind of what that relationship was? I mean, it sounded like you were butting heads with some of your fellow commissioners on the way out there.
If you do your research in Island County, you'll see that there's a lot of contention going on there right now, and I'm not there anymore.
How do you, when this happens in government, how do you personally kind of try to address those issues?
I strive for civility. I got a little book that's George Washington's Words of Civility or something. I forget where I even got that. But I took that to work with me, and when I was chairing the board, I would take that to the dais with me on occasion. I strive for that. I asked for a number of procedures and protocol that I felt would help improve the relations amongst commissioners, and it really didn't, well, it did go outside of that in some cases by some of my colleagues. So I definitely, when I was chairing the board, I was striving to put in different protocols and things that we do. It's difficult as commissioners because there's three of you that can't ever talk outside of being on the record, and so it makes it somewhat difficult. But I'm all about civility and expect the respect to be shown to everybody.
Sort of, I guess, going along with that, you were a county commissioner elsewhere. You're running for auditor now. Is there something that, if one of the commissioners come up for re-election during your time as auditor, would you be wanting, to run for county commissioner at that point? You've got the experience. And Kitsap County, if you look at the elections over the last 10, 15 years, quite a few people have been in a position as commissioner or other places and then gone elsewhere, either in the state or federal government. So are you looking at this as a jumping point to continue further into the political arena, or is this something that you're looking at for the next 10, 20 years as an auditor?
The latter is really what I'm looking at. It I think more closely aligns with my interest. I went after the commissioner position once again trying to offer my skill set and not having spent a lot of time in the public sector, giving that a go. I actually think that this position aligns a lot better with my interest. However, I will say that I feel utmost that my duty is to the people, and if the people actually wanted me to do something different, I think that I would do that.
No questions.
Well, let's get a chance to kind of close this out then. What we usually do is we ask kind of anything we haven't brought up that you think you'd like to share is we'll kind of an opportunity to do that. But then I've also kind of asked with these jobs, as you finish, tell us if I'm a voter who isn't closely involved with county government, how do you say here's why the job is important to your daily life, and here's why I'm a good person to do it. So I'm kind of asking you to do two things with that last statement, but if you were to explain to someone, here's what I think the auditor's really important role is, here's what makes me personally good at those skills, and then anything you'd like to say just to close us off. We start with Dolores, so we'll go to Dolores and then Kelly to finish.
Okay, well, when elected, of course, my top priority is going to be elections, continuing to make, voting accessible. Every year, there are many legislative changes come down that affect the auditor's office. So I think that is going to continue. I have a proven record of implementing changes to state laws the most effective way. Kitsap County, the other thing is I believe in doing more than the minimum required by law. In Kitsap County, our mobile voting program, there's few counties in the nation that do that. There are, our accessible ballot delivery system for voters with disabilities. I think as the aging population, there's going to be more people that will need to take advantages of multiple types of service instead of just one way to provide the information. In the auditor's office in elections, we've also been one of the first departments to implement a social media program in Kitsap County, and I think providing the information concise. We have to look at how people get information now. Most often it's on their smartphone. That's what we use. It's electronic information, and local government needs to move in that direction as much as they can, providing the information and then making these services accessible. So that is my major goal as auditor, and I'll continue to do that. The other thing in looking at our preservation of records and how elections are administered, and then the accountability in the financial reporting. And I wanted to make one note. In Kitsap County, we have won for 17 years now financial awards for our reporting services. And so then there are only 25% of financial services within the county that have ever received that. Our popular financial report, which takes it from the comprehensive one that's like 250 pages down to like 22 pages of all of the information for county government, that's put together so the average person can look at it and see what the county departments do and the budgets. Kitsap County is one of only 3 counties in the state that does that, and we have won awards for that as well. So what you're saying, Kelly, that is going to try to put into place, those are already in place in Kitsap County. What I want to do is to continue to do those types of things. I have the endorsement of the past 3 county auditors, Karen Flynn, Cheryl Huff, and the current auditor, Walt Washington, as several county auditors across the state have also endorsed me. I've been promoted from every job that I have ever held in county government, and I think it's just a really exciting time for me to be able to continue some of those proven things that I have done already in providing service to voters, because the auditor's office is an administrative process. We don't have a lot of leeway in making major changes. We can sometimes influence and assist our legislators and stakeholders, providing information to make those changes that are needed as things evolve. But I think I just think it's really important to remember that the knowledge of the job, really being cautious as we move forward, and really taking in consideration when you make a change, how does that affect everybody, not just your office or your own spot. Just look at it overall. And I feel I am the best person to do that. I have the experience and the background and the knowledge and the proven accomplishments to be the next county auditor.
Thank you. Kelly.
Well, you are right. I did mention that the current auditor, Mr. Walt Washington, has done a lot of progress in making those financial reports discernible to the people, and I want to capitalize on that and continue on those works in being. When I start hearing from the people that we are there, that I can understand this with the amount of time that I've got to put into that, I'll be happy. I do run into a lot of people that are not familiar with the task in the auditor's office, and so I guess you know the auditor's office does pay all of the county bills and all of the special purpose districts, reconciles those funds, and doesn't necessarily do a lot of auditing like over the treasurer's work and thing that we've seen here recently. I've been getting asked about that, and actually those sort of things would require, as the newspaper reports, some more staff time to be able to be ahead of those things. However, I would like to say that there was a couple of times as a commissioner that I did soften the blow of state audits, because I did see something and call it out in advance. There was one situation, and it in fact had to do with not the REIT but the rural sales tax, and there was an expenditure that I was concerned. I didn't think that it was that it was allowable, that it was proper expenditure from that dedicated fund, and I made that point to the Council of Governments that we were working through, and we actually I held steadfast. I said, I think we need to create some kind of develop some kind of protocol or something for these funds, these dedicated funds, so that we don't run into this, because I really think this is a concern. That turned up in an audit later on, and we did get just our hand slapped, our wrist slapped on that one, because we had those protocols in place, because they noticed that we were making efforts that way, because it wasn't improper expenditure. It can happen. There's so many regulations for how you can use money in various dedicated funds and things. And another finding that we had to do with not funding the treasurer's audit up there, office up there enough. And I had called that out in budget meetings when we were trying to prioritize some spending. I said, I think we need to spend a little bit more in the treasurer's office. I don't think they need a little bit more in here, and that turned up in a finding. So that's one of the things that I want to bring forward also, as where I can make people aware of those areas that I think are going to be concerned when the state auditor does come around, because I want to see our government successful at frankly at all levels. And coming from my background in construction, I believe you got to have a good foundation in order to have a good building, and I believe local government is the foundation of our state and our national governments, and that's why I chose to jump in at the local levels. And I want to see us successful here and everywhere.
Thank you guys for coming. We appreciate your time. Good luck to you both.